morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first, as you've heard, St. Gallen team debate on whether we should have reasons to be optimistic about Europe's future. It was great to listen to President Milatovic just now, and he said, in Europe, what we do is we challenge each other, so let's do that. This next hour, slightly less than an hour now, will be in the style of what's called an Oxford debate. It's a very structured debate format, and I've really come to love it over the last years. My best way of describing it is it's a way to listening to very smart people who happen to disagree with each other think out loud. You get to sort of follow their thought process, and I really find it quite instructive. Let me very quickly run you through, if you've never been part of a debate, on how it works. Charlotte has mentioned this is an interactive format. We need you. We need your participation. For that, you will need your phones, which I assume you already have in your hands in a minute, so you get to scan a QR code and do things. What you're going to do is you first all get to vote on whether you agree or disagree with today's motion, which I'm about to introduce. Then we'll have two teams of two people argue in favor and against today's motion, trying to convince you. They'll have opening statements and rebuttals, which are timed at 4 minutes per speakers. They cannot go over time. You'll see a big countdown clock ticking down. This is a very structured format. I will then very briefly challenge each speaker with a question before we move to closing arguments, which are 90 seconds exactly per speaker. And then comes the big moment where you all get to vote again. You all get to vote again on whether you agree or disagree with the motion after having heard the arguments of the speakers. And the team that has made the bigger gains compared to the initial vote will be declared the winner. So this is not about what the majority thinks. This is about which team was able to convince more of you to switch on to their side during the debate. So before you get to vote, let me introduce today's motion, which is there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic about Europe's future. We will show you a link and a QR code now, and I'm going to ask you to scan the code, or if you want, type in a very long, complicated URL. Probably don't want to do that. So please scan the QR code. It will bring you to a poll, and please vote. And while you vote, let me just very briefly outline what we are discussing today. Over the last years, it has become, I would say, fashionable to be kind of gloomy about Europe, especially, again, as President Milatovic has said, in Europe. An aging continent with a slowing economy, incapable to deliver breakthrough innovation, crumbling under the weight of its political divisions, and unable to respond on its own to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Europe, it seemed, was being eclipsed by the much more dynamic economies of America and Asia, and destined to become a geopolitical periphery. But maybe it's premature to write the old continent off. Europe still has a lot going for it. It has a vast integrated market with deep connections between its governments, companies, and citizens. It has a, I would argue, functioning bureaucracy. For all the lamenting about innovation, European companies remain world leaders in many areas. And America's, shall we say, turn away, epitomized by Vice President J.D. Vance's Valentine's Day speech in Munich, you will remember that one, might have started the process for Europe to take its security more into its own hands. So the motion we're putting up for discussion today is there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic about Europe's future. I hope you all had a chance to vote, because now it's time to meet our teams, which I'm now asking to please join me on stage. Welcome. All right, let's cut that short and let's just move on. I will keep the introductions to the speakers very, very short because we do want to spend as much time as possible on debating. They all have incredible CVs, and I encourage you to look them up. You can find them on the website of the symposium, of course, in your My Symposium app, which, if you haven't downloaded it yet, we highly encourage you to do that. So to my right is the team arguing in favor of today's motion, that we should have plenty of reasons to be optimistic about Europe's future. Joining us for this is Francesca Romana D'Antuono, the co-president of Volt, a pan-European political party, which has 5 MPs right now in the European Parliament, as well as many representatives in national and local parliaments. Joining her is Bruno Maçães, an author and journalist who previously served as a minister in the Portuguese government. His latest book is called World Builders, Technology and New Geopolitics. I also apologize for continuing to mispronounce his last name. On the other side, arguing against the motion that there are many reasons to be optimistic about Europe, is Jason Thielman, the founder of S2R Public Affairs, former chief of staff to Steve Daines, a Republican US senator. In the 2024 election cycle, Jason was the executive director of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. And joining him is Abdullahi Alim, the CEO of the Africa Future Fund, which backs ideas and people aiming to shape the trajectory of the continent. He has previously worked for the International Chamber of Commerce and the World Economic Forum. Thank you all for joining us. We will start today by listening to arguments from the team arguing against today's motion, and the opening statements will be delivered by Jason Thielman, who has exactly 4 minutes on the clock. Remember, you don't have to use all your time. You can't use more. Jason, the floor is yours.
Well, at the risk of undercutting my own argument and cutting into my own precious 4 minutes, I will say the strongest argument on the opposite side of the one I am taking today is the outstanding leadership that we see from the young people here at St. Gallen University. It is something that does give you hope for the future, not just of Europe, but of the world. That being said, we on the opposition rise to firmly reject the notion that there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic about the future of Europe. Not because we enjoy pessimism, nor that we do not want to see Europe succeed, but we believe an honest assessment must precede meaningful progress. The reality is this: Europe is facing long-term trajectory of decline in technology, in demographics, in economic competitiveness, and political cohesiveness. These are not surface-level challenges, they are structural. And optimism that ignores them is not hope, it is denial. First, Europe is falling behind in innovation. In a global economy defined by technology, Europe is becoming an innovation backwater. In 2023, venture capital investment in Europe totaled just $55 billion, less than a third of the $170 billion in the United States. The number of European unicorn startups, fewer than 150. US, over 700. Why? Because Europe regulates faster than it innovates. From GDPR to the Digital Markets Act, well-meaning rules have created a system where it's easier to comply than to create. This is not a continent building a future, it's a continent reacting to it. Second, Europe faces a demographic crisis. Demographics are destiny, and Europe's are catastrophic. The average fertility rate in Europe is just 1.46 births per woman, far below the replacement level of 2.1. The working age population is expected to shrink by 50 million people by the year 2070. This means fewer workers, more retirees, and unsustainable pressure on the welfare system. Some say migration can solve this, but we've already seen the backlash from Sweden to Germany. Immigration without integration has led to polarization and social unrest. Europe is not on a path to renewal, it is on a path to economic stagnation and political volatility. Third, Europe's economic and strategic power is eroding. The old economic model, strong welfare state powered by industrial might, is breaking down. Germany's economy, once the envy of Europe, is now in decline, hammered by high energy costs and deindustrialization. The green transition is a green delusion, and has come without a viable energy strategy. Europe shut down nuclear and became reliant on Russian gas until it couldn't. That wasn't leadership, it was strategic failure. And let's not mistake unity on Ukraine for long-term Cohesion. The unity was led and bankrolled by the United States. Europe's defense still depends on American taxpayers and American troops. Members of this great group today, optimism is not a plan. Hope is not a substitute for policy. We wish we could believe in Europe's future. Europe's future is bright, but belief doesn't pay pensions, it doesn't spark innovation, it doesn't solve shrinking labor force or stop political fragmentation. The question isn't whether Europe has any strengths, it's whether those strengths outweigh the deep structural weaknesses threatening its future. And on that, I submit to you the answer is no.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, Jason was slightly worried he would get booed off the stage today, so he started by very nicely complimenting all of you, and I think we've resolved that problem. There you go. There you go. We're going to just move it right along to the opening statement of the team arguing in favor of today's motion. Francesca, Romana, and Antonio, you have 4 minutes on the clock to convince us that we should be optimistic about Europe's future.
Thank you very much. Very interesting arguments, yet if you could choose where to be born, but you didn't know what kind of life you would have, like rich or poor, powerful, powerless, able, disabled, black, white, gay, straight, where would you want to live? If you answered Europe, you've just guaranteed yourself the best odds that even if you're born in a disadvantaged group, you will live a dignified life and have an opportunity to improve it. Because Europe is the answer that everybody who believes in high-quality, affordable healthcare should give, is the answer that everybody who believes that top-level education is not a privilege of the ultra-rich, is the answer that everybody who believes that you should be able to support yourself with an honest job should give. So we're arguing that yes, there's plenty to be fiercely optimistic about Europe's future. And that is because we look at facts. And yes, there are problems, of course, but let's look in which environment we're moving at the moment. The Gini coefficient, a measure of economic equality or inequality, is the lowest in Europe compared to other global regions. And that is not just a number, that is a concrete possibility that if you're born poor, you will improve, that your offspring will improve, that your daughter, your son will have a better life. The American dream, that was a fantastic marketing slogan. Too bad for the US it's a slogan. For us it's a reality. It's every day, it's what we live in Europe. But Europe is not only where democracy thrives. In spite of the very good arguments, Europe is still a top global innovator. 25 countries are in the Global Innovation Index 2024, and 15 of those are European. 7 of them are in the top 10, and it's not just about innovating, it's innovating for the good. It's innovating when it comes to climate tech and to climate policy. So think about Germany's breakthroughs in green hydrogen, or Sweden's sustainable city, or the wind energy in Norway. And I know that the argument is going to be that that's Western Europe, but that's not really true, is it? What about then Spain's solar revolution? What about Cluj-Napoca? It's a Silicon Valley of Romania, a place, a vibrant hub where AI is making waves and software developers are creating the future. So there's a bad news, and the bad news is that yes, Europe can do more. The good news, though, is that Europe can do more. We're still sitting on a huge fiscal space. We're not at the end of our investment rope. We are at the beginning of a new leap. We've done this before, and we can do it again. So when you look at the movements, you have plenty to be optimistic about Europe's future. When you look at the EU Innovation Fund, when you look at the Next Generation EU, when you look at policies like the carbon-adjusted mechanism, which doesn't only influence domestic market, it influences the rest of the world, it nudges the rest of the world. So that's why we believe that even amidst crisis, even amidst the many problems that Europe has, we're not denying that. Of course there are problems and things to fix. Of course there are double standards. Look at what's happening in Gaza. Of course there's a colonial past to confront. Of course there's a far-right rising. Even amidst all of that, we can, will, and are building a better future in Europe, not only for Europeans, but for the rest of the world. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Francesca. The dream may be American, but your timekeeping is very Swiss. Thank you for that. We'll pass it right on to the team opposing the motion. Abdullahi Alim, your rebuttal, why we should not be optimistic about Europe's future.
So, I think as a starting point, so much of what we heard was about Europe's future and Europe's potential. But I say this with due respect and with some concern too, that potential without a willingness and an ability to innovate means very little. I'm not as optimistic about Europe's future as I am about its past and present. And from what I gather from my vantage point, I'll explain a bit later, my vantage point at least shows me that there isn't a reason for you to think so either. I think at a base load, I'm thinking about the culture within the European context. I think there is a legacy and appreciation of the past. I think there's an unhealthy loyalty to existing institutions, existing ways of thinking. And I think it gets a bit destructive when you're unable to part ways with that and make way for the new. So when you look at, for example, the top 40 businesses in Europe today, when you look at industry, for example, the Nestle's of the world, the Volkswagens of the world, these were the big industry giants 40 years ago. So it reflects maybe some kind of gap in the dynamism of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. When we think of, for example, the higher education institutions here in Europe, and you make comparable peer-to-peer comparisons with the institutions in coastal America or advanced Asian economies, you also see there are less examples of innovation spawning out of higher education. When I see Brussels' often immediate impulse to regulate new technologies as opposed to preferencing speed and experimentation, I think all in all it speaks to an unhealthy loyalty to existing systems, and I think to some degree Europe is a prisoner of its past success. When I look at Europe's relationship with the New World, I'm talking principally Asia and Africa, I also see more reason to be concerned. First and foremost, a demographic bid. This is what we call a present majority part of the world, meaning the vast majority of the population of the 21st century in Europe is already born. You will contend with aging dynamics, which will impact, of course, your ability to service a growing economic engine. So think of the needs in manufacturing, in agriculture, think about transportation and logistics. Unfortunately, we haven't advanced far enough when it comes to robotics and AI to truly replace labor at scale. So unfortunately, those shortages will show up and it will impact the economic performance of the continent moving forward as well. The exact opposite of what I'm seeing in Africa. We've got a vibrant, large population of young people who are increasingly educated, increasingly entering the middle class, who are entrepreneurial and willing and able to show up when new opportunities show up themselves too. When I look at the relationship that Europe has to this continent of opportunity, it has some of the most arable land on Earth at the moment. It has some of the most, not so rare earths in the world as well. It's increasing investments in logistics and transportation networks. It's why, for example, you see massive investments from China, massive investments from the US, and now even massive investments from the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Just last year, the UAE was the largest investor on the continent, outpacing China by a factor of 10. This is to say that the new world is already beginning to show up, and it's beginning to show its success. But unfortunately, Europe's relationship with itself is mired by this legacy thinking, and in its relationship with the new world is still mired by this form of colonial legacy as well. Seeing Africa through a lens of aid dependency, seeing Africa as something to be managed, seeing Africa as a security and migration threat, and not seeing it for its potential. For that reason, I think Europe has done very well in the past. It's still a great economic engine of today's world, but I think it's a prisoner of that success, and it's why I'm not optimistic about its future.
Thank you. Thank you, Abdullahi Alim. Strong words as well. So last but not least, we're turning it over to Bruno Maçães, 4 minutes to rebut Abdullahi and Jason's arguments.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to talk to this great audience. Jason said it's a great audience. It's not a great audience, it's the greatest audience. And a great example of European entrepreneurship. To see the students organize a conference like this, you can't see it in many places in the world. I feel that my duty here is to unpack some of this mythology that my two colleagues on the left have expressed, because a lot of those things simply do not correspond to reality. To put the United States on a pedestal of economic growth, yes, maybe it's true if you look to the immediate past, But what was that based on? On the shale gas revolution. Is this the future? Jason said we are sort of mired in the green transition that will destroy us. Does anyone in this room think that the future is fossil fuels? Because if you think that the future is fossil fuels, then they are right. And Europe might not lead the future. If you think that the future is the green transition, then Europe is leading that green transition. And that's not a recipe for future economic growth. Silicon Valley and the myth of the entrepreneur. Do you think it takes entrepreneurial genius to come up with Facebook? Come on. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, it was possible to believe that. It doesn't take that. What happened, let's be honest about what happened, was that Europe was still in the kind of drunkenness of 1989. We looked to the United States as a kind of a higher god. And we opened our digital markets to American companies that then took advantage of network effects to establish a leadership from which it's very difficult to dislodge them. It's nothing about entrepreneurial genius. Don't believe those myths. It's nothing about regulation. Look, my best argument to you is you do business with the US, I'm sure, or you apply to American universities, or you have to get paid by some American contractor, as I have sometimes. Do you think the United States is less regulated than Europe? Because I'm at the point of asking people who contract my services in the United States not to pay me. It takes more hours to fill all the forms that I need to fill than it takes to deliver the product that they want. This is the United States that cannot build high-speed railways, that is about to spend $1 trillion to build a railway from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and they'll never finish it. Now they're talking about a railway that will divert somewhere on the way, and you'll have to change to another railway. This is the image that America is projecting. By the way, where is that GDP? Minus 3% in the last quarter. EU, minus 0.3%, and the Eurozone plus 0.4%. Europe is clearly the place that investors are turning to as they look to the confusion across the Atlantic. And I leave you with one thought. President Trump the other day announced that foreign movies are going to have a tariff of 100%. Do you want to live in a place where one man decides which movies you watch, which dolls you buy? He's already announced that you cannot buy 26 dolls. You have to buy 2 dolls, and they cannot be Chinese. Soon enough, you're going to have a picture of the doll that you're supposed to buy for your children, and that's a tremendous doll that he has picked for you. Because Europe is not this. Europe is a place of rules, a place of laws, a place where there isn't one man deciding what you watch, what clothes you wear, what dolls you buy for your children. And this is more important than the last quarter's GDP growth figures. But by the way, as I just said, last quarter's GDP figures are pretty dramatic for the United States. Put all this together, I think your vote is easy, and I look forward to finding out what it is.
Thank you. I don't know if any of you had dolls on the bingo cards of which arguments were going to come up today. I hadn't, but it's great to hear. Very convincing. We're going to very briefly now ask some questions to all of our debatants. We're going to keep this very short to make up for some time and not cut into the break too much. Jason, I'm going to start with you. The prevailing feeling, I think, in Europe right now is that boosting the continent's defenses, which is what has been agreed and what Europe wants to do, will not only improve the continent's security, it would also improve and jumpstart the economy. Is that feeling wrong?
No, I think Europe taking a proactive decision to reinvest in its military-industrial base would be to its great advantage.
And would not be a reason to be very optimistic?
We have not, we've only seen a few green shoots, and I'm glad the president took aggressive action to force you off of inaction.
But you seem not convinced that we would actually get there.
I do have concerns whether or not you will actually follow through.
What are those concerns?
I think what you saw yesterday, for example, with the vote with the Chancellor in Germany, an example of political fragmentation, which I illustrated in my opening remarks, that's going to make it continually difficult, I think, to have the unified will to do the sort of aggressive actions that are going to be needed to lift Europe out of its doldrums. You make a fantastic argument that Europe's a wonderful place to live today, but that's not what we're debating today. What we're debating today is Europe going to be a fantastic place to live and a better place to live 50 years from now, and I don't see that under current trajectory. I do see some hope, certainly, in the decision and the appearance of at least initial decisions and some actions to reinvest in your own national security future.
Thank you. Francesca, I think one of the strongest arguments from the other side that has come up a couple of times is Europe's difficulties with innovation. Bruno said, it didn't take entrepreneurial genius to invent Facebook, but I think we have to acknowledge that it is very obvious the next big technological shift is AI. And again, here, Europe just doesn't play a meaningful role. The technology and its applications will be shaped elsewhere. They will be shaped in the US, they will be shaped in China, maybe there's some other players, but Europe is far and few in between. What can Europe do to counteract that, and what are the implications if we don't?
Look, I think there are two points I would like to make on this. So the first one is, the US and China are moving faster. That's, of course that's true, because autocracies move faster. That's what they do. So do you want to live in an autocracy? Then be my guest. And you can vote for that other motion. But democracy and understanding how this big tech revolution will impact the life, not of someone far away, of us, really, in this room, takes time, and yes, takes regulation. I think we've seen what has happened with the social media mess and the elections that came out of the great investment that was done on social media fake news. So I say, yes, we do regulate, and we are respectful of human rights when we do that. Now, how do we get into that game? As I mentioned before, Europe is not... I disagree that I make the argument that Europe is perfect now. What I'm saying is actually that given that this is the basis, so a fantastic place to live, high quality, some movements when it comes to also reshaping how we think and innovating democracy and also innovating the tech industry, then we're still sitting on a huge fiscal space and possibility to make these investments. Germany has already deleted the Schwarze Null rule. During COVID, we did Corona bonds. These are all signals that we actually can do it, and that's how we will participate in the race.
Thank you. Abdullahi, you made this point that Europe has, you referred to as an unhealthy loyalty to existing systems. And I don't think that's wrong, that loyalty is here, but I want to challenge you on the fact whether it's unhealthy. We see so much turmoil in the world, so many things are changing, there are so many crises. Isn't it an advantage, is a reason to be optimistic about, I would argue, the one place that offers stability, that offers predictability? Isn't that actually a strength much more than a weakness?
I used to lead a global risk and foresight project, actually in Paris, before my current work. And I noticed that nowhere else in the world was there a fascination with managing the future, managing the risks, than there was in Europe. I think in other parts of the world, they saw it as an opportunity. This shock, yes, it's disruptive, but maybe because they don't have the same level of legacy to protect, the same kind of track record to be fearful of it sort of moving up and down, there was an openness and willingness to say, okay, well, potentially, how can I thrive in this new space? So instead of reverting back to what was familiar, some other parts of the world, the New World in particular, wanted to take a step to say, okay, what are the bold investments? What are the initiatives that we need to take lead on to see where we can potentially win on this new front? So I don't think it's always healthy to go back to what's familiar.
Bruno, the argument that both Abdullahi and Jason brought up is demographics. And it's true. Europe is an aging continent. There's no disputing that. The median age is 44.7. It's been rising by over 2 years since 2014. And it's also a place where not just the population is aging, it's also a place that has very, very generous retirement schemes. is it possible for Europe in the next 15 to 20 years to manage what is an immense demographic transition without creating social upheaval?
Why not? We have new technology. We'll soon have...
Well, we don't. The others have it. We have to buy it, no?
No, I mean, technology we're talking about, AI, robots, all this is going to be very important to have healthy, happy aging for our populations. You know, I don't think of human beings as having to be bred in numbers, and we have to compare those numbers. What's important is to have elder people that have their rights respected, compare how we take care of our elder people to what happens in the United States. Just read a dramatic story about the costs of elderly care in the United States, sometimes $10,000 a month for very poor care and no support whatsoever. I think that is what is really important. And then, you know, I'm very much in favor of immigration, and I'm very much in favor of a more active lifestyle for people for doing more years. The important thing is not to have high numbers of population. The important thing is to have a population that is educated, that is happy, that is taken care of. And I think in Europe we still have this. You know, it was very striking for me when I was helping some refugees from Afghanistan to leave Afghanistan, and I asked them, do you want help? Perhaps I can help also a little bit with the United States. And they said, no, we want to go to Switzerland, we want to go to Germany, we want to go to London. Because if you have money in the United States, you can be very happy, but we don't have money.
Jason, you were very careful to not too much kind of like paint an America-Europe comparison, perhaps maybe because you're worried about being booed off stage, but Bruno kind of went there and criticized the United States for not being able to build high-speed trains, which again I think is an argument that has come up. So is that a fair comparison? And would you say that we should be more optimistic about America's future than about Europe's? Or should we just equally pessimistic about either?
I would say it's not a relevant comparison as it relates to the outcome of today's debate.
Why not?
Because we're talking about the future of Europe. Is it going to be brighter than the future of today? Is it cause for optimism? And I would argue every point that you have put on the pro team has put on the table here is a point that argues for why Europe is a great place to live today. They are not defending or substantiating in any meaningful way why it is going to continue to be a great place. They've refused to answer in a meaningful way the demographic crisis. There's not a substantive answer on the innovation crisis. The answer to the demographic crisis is that we're going to have innovation that we don't actually have.
We have it. Hang on. We have less than 2 minutes left. I want to put one last question to the team in favor. Regarding the future, things may look very stable right now, but yesterday we've seen the new German chancellor only being confirmed in a second vote. Seems like a warning shot. It's not inconceivable that a few years down the road, major European countries would be governed, at least in part, by far-right parties which oppose European integration. How would that change your assessment?
Breaking news, the new far-right parties don't oppose European integration anymore. It's true. Like, where is Grexit, Italexit, all of this? Like, Meloni, she's a far-right leader as she exits the European Union? I don't think so. And that's because we are exactly talking about the future of the EU and not the past. Meaning that everyone, even the far-right at the moment, sees the opportunity of uniting more. I think the real answer to your question about innovation is Europe still doesn't have a common fiscal system. Do you realize how many billions that would unblock? That's why we're optimistic, because we are at the beginning. We've achieved all the results we've achieved with very little means compared to what we could have. So the hope, the road ahead of us, it's actually where optimism lays, not in the past, but in what we can achieve. Just one measure, common fiscal system, just that, would unlock so much. And is it happening now? No, of course. Are discussions happening, and are these processes accelerating every time there is a crisis? Ukraine, Corona, whatever, yes, they are. So this is coming, and this is coming so that we will make the leap.
Thank you very much. That concludes the discussion part. We're going to move right along to, don't clap yet. We're going to move right along to closing statements, 90 seconds on the clock for each speaker in the same order as in the beginning. Jason gets to go first. Please remember, 90 seconds is a lot less time than you think.
I would put to you again, the arguments that have been put forward here are arguments about the present and the past in support of the resolution. They are not arguments about the future. I wish that they were. I want a strong, vibrant, and healthy Europe. I think it is in the best interest of the world. It's the best interest of my country, the United States. But your current trajectory simply does not support optimism in that direction. You talk about we should be optimistic because of a common fiscal system. Is Europe closer to being integrated? Is the EU closer to being stronger today than it was 10 years ago? It seems to me that you have greater political pressures today, increasing fragmentation, than you did a short time ago. So that reason also falls.
Thank you very much. You only used up half of your time.
I thought I saw 0 on there, so I thought.
I think that's just at 0 all the time, but there's a clock behind you, but it's good. Like you want to say more?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's not bad if you speak shortly.
Brevity is indeed the soul of wit. But there one other point here I would like to make. You reference dolls, and in order to make sure we win our bingo cards today, I'll bring dolls back. One of the other great challenges here, and we see this with electric cars and the green transition. You talk about railways and so forth. You're dependent upon China. What you have done is you're not buying Chinese dolls, but you've turned yourself into a Chinese marionette by allowing tech transfers and making yourself completely subject to the whims of gaining their marketplace instead of looking out for your own self-interest.
Excellent, thank you. We're going to assume that was 90 seconds. Thank you. Francesca, 90 seconds for you. Your closing statement, please.
Yes, so I will scrap my notes and start by replying directly to Jason and to you. Maybe. Is it Europe closer to integrating than it was 10 years ago? Yes, it is closer. And it is closer because Europe, and this is something I don't love, but it's just a reality, moves when it's a time of crisis. Now, this is a time of crisis, and things are happening already. They've happened. I want to go back to that. During the coronavirus, we did comment that this was unthinkable. I know many in the audience are German. This was unthinkable before, and yet we did. We had a major crisis when it comes to security and wars exploding, and boom, we realized the opportunity to do more on defense. Now, is this the best way forward? No, of course, I would want Europe to be, more integrated quicker. But we cannot say that things are not advancing. A common fiscal system is sad if it's something that doesn't matter. The point is exactly the future. We have now still so many opportunities to build on what was the so-called past glory. I don't think there's anything about past glories because museums don't invent offshore wind turbines as we are doing. Museums don't teach AI to lower emissions, and yet this is what Europe is doing. So yes, and yes, there is plenty to be optimistic about Europe's future because we can see all the signs already there.
Thank you very much, Francesca Romana D'Antuono. Closing statement in favor of the motion. Abdullahi Alim, your 90 seconds against being optimistic on Europe's future.
Okay. I think very quickly, the reason to be optimistic or not optimistic about Europe's future is not a question of in comparison to the United States. I think it's Europe in reference to Europe's future on its own. And I think you can also think about Europe's relationship with other parts of the world as well, which is what I'm going to go back to. When you think about where in the world, if you had to, for example, lend money, provide credit to the private sector anywhere in the world right now, based on data that the World Bank has just disclosed recently over the last 20 years, you are most likely to regain your money. The highest level of loan retention anywhere in the world is Sub-Saharan Africa at the moment. When you look at default rates, sovereign default rates, when you look at, for example, at Greece, how many times has Greece defaulted on its sovereign loans? We lost count. Take comparison to a country, a small West African country like Senegal. How many times has it defaulted on its loans? 0. So I think what I'm just trying to get the audience here to understand, because it's a largely European contingent here, is to say that please do not rely on legacy perceptions of what the new world and new economy is going to look and sound like. The future, I think, for the most immediate sense, might look like South Asia. Thereafter, I think it's going to look like Sub-Saharan Africa. My thing is for Europe to be optimistic, it needs to part ways with old assumptions of how it engages with the continent. It has to part ways with old economic and defense arrangements, and it has to recognize that there is a middle class that is increasingly relying on decolonial thought, and their patience is running low.
Thank you very much for that closing statement. Last but not least, Bruno Maçães, 90 seconds to convince us we should be optimistic.
You know, the best argument, just listening to Francesca and seeing the passion. I don't see the same passion on the other side, just a gloomy pessimism over and over again. And notice the contradictions. Jason said, we don't have technology, and then he said, we're transferring all our technology to China. And in fact, every time I'm invited to the United States, I'll go next week, is to talk about the threat of European technology being transferred to China. The United States is obsessed about this, and I think that's the best evidence that we have a lot of technology. I'm not actually optimistic about the past. I'm optimistic about the future. I think the last 20 years were not good at all. I think we were distracted. I think we didn't take the threat seriously. I think we were too close to the United States. I think we didn't realize that the American interest and European interest are different things. They may be aligned, but they are different things. What I'm optimistic about is the next 20 years, with the green transition, with real investment, using our fiscal space for the first time, connecting to the rest of the world, connecting to the developing world. This is where the optimism is, and I think this is where there's a lot of pessimism in other parts of the world. So not about the past, but about the future. When you see that 75% of American scientists want to leave the United States, according to Nature magazine, and most of them want to come to Europe, there's no way but to be optimistic about the future of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we have arrived at the most important part of today's debate, and it is for you to vote again. After having heard arguments for both sides, how do you feel about today's motion that there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic about Europe? Will you stick to the opinion that you submitted in the beginning? Has somebody up here convinced you to change your mind? It's time to vote again. You know how this works. Please take out your phones, scan the QR code. The question is exactly the same. Do you agree or disagree with today's motion? And because we've been talking a lot up here, we will give you 45 seconds to vote in quiet and peace, discuss amongst yourselves if need be.
It's a good job, huh? It's not as easy, actually, to do your job. Has to be fast. Keep moving, right? Yeah, but I love that. And they're taking it seriously, everyone voting.
It was good, no? It was good, right?
I think we did well. Because the thing is, if you sound defensive,
You have about 10 more seconds. 10 more seconds to vote. Is somebody not yet who's not voted yet? You show your hand? Okay. Will you? What's the delay? Oh, we got to move out of the way. Should we duck? Come on. Okay. This is a technical issue. Better now? Yes. Excellent. We need your votes, guys. It's not going to be a complete picture. Did you vote in the first time? Yeah. Excellent. Good. Okay. We're going to give these guys 3 more seconds to make up their minds. But then, and for real this time, we are, they're smart. They're actually scanning the QR code in the back. That's also very clever. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're done. Thank you very much. So now, the team here has to apply some advanced statistics. It's a business university, after all, to calculate which side has gained more votes throughout the debate. While they do that, let me just quickly tell you about what's happening after this. So we're going to move into about a 35-minute break before the next session block starts. It's the first big breakout slot of this year's symposium. Please check on your program where your session will take place. For many of you, this will be in the Square building, which is about a 10-minute walk from here. You can find the program on the app My Symposium, which we encourage all of you to download in the relevant app stores. Just search for My Symposium or My SGS, and you will find it. You can also find the program on our screens and on the printout of the program offered at our info desks. If any of you have not yet registered for a session after this break, we encourage you to go to the square and participate in the St. Gallen talk session on the ground floor, which offers you to engage in a unique conversation with someone with different views of your own. The session is organized together with German media house Die Zeit, and you can access it even if you haven't booked it. And I think Bruno will be there as well. Another reason to go. Okay, I'm being told the results are ready. This is a very exciting moment. I have not seen them, so I will see them at the same time as you. I'm asking the team to show us the results, and I'll read them out for you. So in the first debate, 69 of you agreed that we should be optimistic about Europe. Only 21% disagreed. After the debate, this was only 53% agreeing, 41 disagreeing with today's motion, which means the team arguing against the debate has gained 20 points, and I'm declaring them the winners of the first St. Gallen team debate. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Abdullahi.
Thank you. We're very articulate and passionate.
Oh, thank you. It was very nice.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Good job.
Thank you for mentioning Gallen.
Of course, it's a St. Gallen symposium, so there are no real losers here.
No, they lost.
Still a majority of you agreed that we should be optimistic about Europe's future. So congratulations to the winning team. Congratulations to all the debaters, and of course, thank you for being such an engaged audience and taking this seriously. We're concluding by saying, yes, there are indeed reasons to feel optimistic about Europe's future, but there are also many challenges. And if you're not sometimes feeling pessimistic about Europe or the world in general, I envy you. So that's why gatherings like the St. Gallen Symposium are so important, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to host a debate, and I'm grateful that we have the next 2 days to continue discussing these challenges and hopefully come to an agreement on solution. This concludes the first St. Gallen team debate. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you, guys.